We're going to talk about the relationship between your shoulder line and your hip line. If I look at most pitchers in MLB and I look at their torso, which is the combination of their trunk and their pelvis, and you took a parallel line across the top of their hips and a parallel line across the top of their shoulders, they tend to keep their torso parallel throughout the pitch, from the bottom of the arm circle to foot touch. So let's take a look at the three pitchers in front of you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our normal on the left here, and I'm going to take him all the way to the bottom of the arm circle. That's where we really start to really observe the torso. So I'll take him right to the bottom of the arm circle, which is where the ball gets to the lowest point. And now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw, like we talked about, these horizontal lines that approximate, let's say, from the top of the back hip to the top of the right of the lead hip. And then I'm going to do the same thing in the shoulders, right, from the top of the shoulder to the top of the shoulder. And you can see those are relatively parallel, which is what we see with most pitchers. And if I continue him all the way through, and I like to take him all the way down to foot touch, you'll see that the torso, that's the shoulders, the trunk, and the pelvis, pretty much remain level throughout this entire pitch. Sometimes it's hard to see because of the shirt, but you can see that's pretty good as he's going through, right? That's what we normally see. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the first, let's say, difference that we see with MLB pitchers and with young kids. And this one right here, we call closing the backside, because if I take him to the bottom of the arm circle, and I'll go right to here, you can see he's got this really big drop in the shoulder. So if I want to approximate the shoulder line, it'll be something like this, and I'll make that a little thicker so we can see that a little better. And then if I go to the pelvis, right, so the pelvis is probably going to be parallel to that line. Now what you would see is that those two lines are converging behind him. Anytime the two lines converge behind you, we call it closing the backside. Closing the backside can happen for a couple reasons. One of the most common reasons is for deception. A lot of times the pitcher will take their glove and they'll raise their glove hand up. If they raise their glove hand up almost to hide the ball, then you're going to see that maybe they'll drop the back shoulder, and that can create a closing the backside. We also have two types of pitchers. We have what we call the merry-go-rounds, where they go round and round, and then we have the Ferris wheel, where they or Steve likes to call them rock and rollers. They kind of go more lateral versus rotary. The rock and rollers tend to close the backside. Now there's a lot of data that shows in MLB that the guys that close the backside actually can increase their velo. So we have a lot of great pitchers that actually close the backside, and it can create some velocity that maybe they can't get if they keep them parallel. So I would say both of those, the most common, parallel and closing the backside, are okay in our book. Now let's talk about the third one. Now this is the one that is one of our inhibitors. We call this closing the front side. And this is one that it's really hard to keep your kinematic sequence efficient doing this. So if I take my pitcher here and we take them all the way down to the bottom of the arm circle again, you can already start to see how different this is. So from here, if I draw that line again, if I approximate across the top of the shoulders, the shoulder lines almost looks like the back shoulder's higher, and then it looks like the front hip is higher. So now that's a severe closing the front side. Now why is this worse? Well, a couple things happen here. Sometimes the upper body can basically get out of sequence. Like we talked about the kinematic sequence, you want your lower body to lead, but if the upper body is leading and it can cause something we're going to talk about coming up called getting out in front, it's really hard to recover and get that energy from the ground. And again, if I take him through, some pitchers are great at recovering from this, and they'll get to parallel by the time they get the foot touch. He's trying here, and some won't, and they'll keep their torso out in front, and that can lead to all kinds of problems. So basically those are our three options here. We've got our parallel, closing the back, and then the main inhibitor that we're worried about, that's closing the front. Now, what can cause this? Well, obviously there are some technical causes. Steve will talk about those. Physical causes, so anything that prevents you from flexing the stride hip. So if you go to lift this leg and you flex your hip, that's normal. If you have to hike your pelvis to lift your leg, well then obviously that can cause a closing the front side. Any type of disassociation problem, if you can't disassociate your lower body from your upper body and your upper body has to lead, well then that will definitely lead to closing the front side. This is closing the front side. One of the big